The Galactic Council's grand chamber was filled with the murmurs of hundreds of alien delegates. Towering reptilian warlords, insectoid strategists, and floating energy beings all gathered in one place, their glowing eyes fixed on the central podium. In the center of the chamber stood humanity's last representative, Ambassador Elias Carter. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fury. "Humanity has done nothing to deserve this," Carter said, his voice echoing through the hall. "We have honored our treaties. We have fought side by side with many of you. We have built, traded, and shared our knowledge. And yet today, you vote to cast us out like criminals." The Supreme Chancellor, a towering avian creature with shimmering golden feathers, raised a wing for silence. His beady eyes gleamed with cold amusement. "Ambassador Carter, the decision is final. Humanity has proven itself unpredictable, dangerous. Your kind has an unnatural ability to adapt, to survive where you should not. We have seen how you turned barren wastelands into thriving cities, how you took primitive weapons and turned them into galaxy-shaking superweapons. You are a threat to the balance of power." Carter's hands clenched into fists. "A threat?" He laughed bitterly. "Because we refuse to be weak. Because we fought back when attacked." A hulking warlord from the Tarek Dominion slammed his fist on the table. "You call it fighting back. We call it defiance. When the Typhos Empire invaded your outer colonies, did you wait for the Council's aid? No. You built weapons in secret and turned their armada into wreckage. You did not ask for permission. That is why you must go." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The galactic elite had already made up their minds. Carter exhaled sharply. "And what of our allies? What of those who stand with us?" He gestured towards a handful of delegates who sat silently, their eyes downcast. "Will you exile them too?" The Chancellor's feathers fluffed with amusement. "Those who wish to follow humanity into exile may do so. But no species will risk their standing for you." Silence. None of the allied species spoke. Even those who once stood beside humanity refused to meet Carter's gaze. Fear had silenced them all. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Final vote commencing. One by one, the delegates raised their hands, claws, tentacles, or glowing appendages. One by one, they sealed humanity's fate. Carter stood still as the results flashed before him. Decision. Humanity is hereby exiled from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. His blood ran cold. It was over. The Chancellor leaned forward. "Your people have one standard cycle to leave Council space. Any human ships found beyond that deadline will be destroyed." Carter turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. He looked back at the assembly of aliens who had just condemned his entire species. His voice was calm, but the promise in his words sent chills through the chamber. "You think you've won. You believe humanity will fade into the darkness and be forgotten." He met the Chancellor's eyes. "But let me tell you something." He stepped forward, his voice a low whisper that carried through the hall. "You exiled us, but you have no idea what you've just done." A flicker of unease passed through the Chancellor's expression. Carter's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "We will return." And with that, he walked away. A world abandoned. Earth's evacuation was swift. Billions of humans forced to leave behind their colonies, their stations, their dreams. The galactic community watched from a distance, expecting humanity to break under the weight of its punishment. Stripped of resources, denied access to trade, and cast into the void, Earth was expected to wither and die. But something strange happened. Instead of broadcasting messages of despair, Earth fell silent. Their remaining ships vanished from known space. Their communications went dark. They withdrew into the cold emptiness beyond the edges of the galactic maps. The Galactic Council waited for the inevitable distress signals, but none came. Days passed, then months, then years. Humanity had disappeared, and somewhere in the shadows of the void, beyond the reach of the Galactic Council's watchful eyes, Earth whispered one final promise. "We will return, and when we do, the galaxy will never be the same. The galaxy moved on, believing humanity was nothing more than a fading memory. The Galactic Council, confident in its decision, focused on expanding trade routes, resolving minor conflicts, and maintaining its fragile balance of power. But while the Council rested, humanity did not. Far beyond the mapped territories, in the cold abyss where no empire dared to go, Earth was rebuilding. The Lost Fleet. Commander Adrian Vale stood on the bridge of the Erebus, gazing out at the void. The warship was one of many drifting silently in the darkness, its black hull blending seamlessly with the stars. Around him, hundreds of other vessels, battlecruisers, stealth corvettes, and experimental dreadnoughts, hung in formation, their lights dimmed to near invisibility. "We have completed another wave of construction, sir," reported Lieutenant Mira Jansen, her voice filled with restrained excitement. "Shipyards are operational at full capacity. Weapons research is progressing faster than expected." Vale nodded, his sharp green eyes never leaving the void beyond. "And the test runs?" Jansen hesitated, then grinned. "Successful. The prototypes exceeded all performance predictions." Vale's lips curled into a satisfied smirk. The Council thought humanity had been crippled, but in reality, they had given Earth exactly what it needed: freedom. Free from politics. Free from oversight. Free to build without interference. Instead of begging for scraps from the galactic markets, humanity had turned inward, refining its technologies, pushing the limits of science, and reshaping its military doctrine. And now, the results were beginning to show. The Black World. Deep within an uncharted nebula, hidden behind layers of electronic distortion and gravitational anomalies, Earth had found a new home. They called it Erebus Prime, a world of towering shipyards, underground megacities, and research facilities stretching across entire continents. It was not a paradise, but it was something better. It was a fortress. Entire generations were raised under the doctrine of survival and vengeance. Scientists worked tirelessly, crafting weapons and warships unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Soldiers trained in zero-gravity battlefields, mastering combat in conditions no alien military could endure. Every human on Erebus Prime knew the truth. They had been exiled, but they had not been defeated. And when the time was right, they would return. The warning. The Galactic Council's complacency was shattered when the first whisper of humanity's resurgence arrived. It began with a distress signal. A Xyphos Empire patrol fleet had gone missing near the outer edges of Council-controlled space. A standard search party was dispatched. 5 warships, more than enough to handle pirates or scavengers. They never returned. Days later, a single escape pod drifted into a Xyphos outpost, carrying a wounded officer. His body was battered, his exosuit barely functional, but his mind was intact. His final words before he died sent a wave of fear through the Empire. The humans are out there, and they are watching. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council began to feel something they had never associated with humanity. Dread. The calm before the storm. Back on Erebus Prime, Commander Vale stood in the War Council chamber, surrounded by the leaders of humanity's rebirth. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing maps of the galaxy, fleet formations, and potential targets. "The Council still believes we are broken," Vale said, his voice calm but filled with quiet fury. "They believe our exile was the end of us." He turned to face the assembled officers, engineers, and strategists, the brightest minds Earth had ever produced. "They are wrong." A pause. Then, a single command echoed through the chamber, sealing the fate of the galaxy. "Prepare the fleet." The Galactic Council scrambled to make sense of the rumors. Reports of missing ships and ghost signals in the Outer Rim were dismissed as anomalies, until an entire Xyphos Empire war convoy vanished without a trace. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. The Council panicked. They launched an investigation, deploying scout fleets to search the void for answers. But what they found only deepened their fear. The humans were not only alive, They were watching, and they were preparing. The vanishing convoy. Captain Rahl of the Typhos Empire stood on the bridge of his battlecruiser, the Vornak's Claw, scanning the emptiness beyond the viewport. His fleet, 3 cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 2 supply ships, was returning from a routine patrol. Nothing had happened. No pirates. No enemy fleets. Just silence. Then, without warning, the silence broke. A shadow moved in the void. It was barely visible, just a flicker, like a ripple in space itself. Before Rahl could react, the alarms blared. Energy spikes detected. Unknown ships emerging. Static. The lead destroyer, Exiled, exploded in a flash of blinding blue energy, its shields failing instantly. The entire ship disintegrated before his eyes. More explosions followed. One by one, the ships around him vanished in a storm of fire and debris. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The humans weren't attacking like any known species. They weren't sending fleets in formation or making grand declarations. They were striking from the dark, eliminating targets with precision, and then fading away before anyone could understand what had happened. Rahl barely managed to activate his escape pod before his ship was torn apart. His last sight before the pod ejected was a warship unlike anything in the known galaxy, sleek, black as the void, and utterly silent. Then, darkness. The council reacts. The council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from every major empire shouted over one another, demanding explanations. How could the humans have survived? This is impossible. They were exiled. They had nothing. Yet they are here, and they are hunting us. At the head of the table, Supreme Chancellor Vorik of the Galactic Council sat in silence, his reptilian fingers tapping against the armrest of his throne-like seat. He had underestimated humanity once. He would not do so again. "We must respond," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "Deploy a fleet to the outer rim. Find the humans, and if they are truly behind these attacks." His yellow eyes narrowed. "Exterminate them. The shadow war begins. In the depths of the uncharted void, aboard the hidden command vessel Erebus Prime, Commander Adrian Vale watched intercepted council transmissions. A cold smile crossed his face. "They're scared." Lieutenant Mira Jansen nodded, arms crossed. "And they should be." Vale turned toward the display, where a fleet of human warships hung in perfect silence, waiting for his command. "They think they can hunt us down," he mused. "Let's remind them why shadows can't be caught." He gave the order. The Ghost Fleet moved, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council wasted no time. A massive fleet, one of the largest ever assembled, was sent to the outer rim, armed with the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their mission was simple: find the humans and erase them. But as they ventured into the uncharted void, something became disturbingly clear. They were not the hunters. They were the prey. The ambush. Admiral Xorvac, a seasoned veteran of countless wars, led the Council's fleet. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed pirate strongholds, and conquered entire planets. But nothing had prepared him for this. His fleet, a formation of over 50 warships, drifted cautiously through the dark, scanning for signs of human activity. Every sensor was at maximum sensitivity, every weapon primed. Yet the void remained silent. Then, one by one, the ships started vanishing. It started with the scout ships. They simply disappeared from the fleet's formations. No alarms, no distress calls, just silence. Then came the cruisers. Entire squadrons were wiped out before they could even react. Panic spread through the fleet. The humans weren't fighting fair. They weren't engaging in open combat or responding to hails. They struck from the shadows, disabling communication lines, jamming sensors, and hitting key targets with surgical precision. The hunters had become the hunted. Ghosts in the void. On the command bridge of Erebus Prime, Commander Adrian Vale watched the chaos unfold with calculated satisfaction. The Galactic Council had sent a fleet, believing they would crush humanity once and for all. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had entered humanity's domain. Vale turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mira Jansen. Status: all targets are isolated, she reported. Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking. Shall we begin Phase 2? Vale nodded. The humans didn't have superior numbers. They didn't have more powerful weapons. What they had was strategy. The Galactic Council had built their war doctrines around grand, open battles, where sheer firepower determined the victor. But humanity had spent centuries perfecting asymmetrical warfare. The enemy fleet was still looking for them. They had no idea that humanity had already infiltrated their systems, disabled their targeting arrays, and scrambled their communications. Begin the harvest, Vale ordered. Across the void, human warships decloaked, silent predators emerging from the shadows. Their weapons hummed to life, unleashing devastation upon their confused and helpless foes. The Council had come to wipe out humanity. Instead, they had delivered their warships as gifts, and humanity would take everything. The Galactic Council's fleet was in complete disarray. What was supposed to be a swift operation, an overwhelming show of force to erase the last remnants of humanity, had turned into a waking nightmare. Ships disappeared into the blackness of space, their distress calls cut short before they could even be understood. Veterans of 100 wars found themselves helpless against an enemy that refused to engage in traditional combat. And at the heart of it all was Commander Adrian Vale. From the bridge of the Erebus Prime, he watched as the enemy fleet crumbled, their once proud warships drifting lifelessly in the void. But humanity wasn't here to simply destroy. They were here to take. The trap snapped shut. Admiral Xorvac gripped the armrests of his command chair, his claws digging into the reinforced alloy. His fleet had been the pride of the Council, a force meant to bring an end to humanity's resurgence. Instead, they were being picked apart like prey. Status, he barked, his voice barely masking his growing fear. His officers scrambled, their screens flooded with garbled sensor data and half-complete distress signals. Admiral, we've lost contact with the forward assault group. Our rear formation is reporting. The officer froze as his screen suddenly went dark. Xorvac turned to his tactical officer, a seasoned strategist who had never lost a battle. Where are they attacking from? The officer's mandibles clicked nervously. They aren't attacking, sir. Xorvac's eyes narrowed. Explain. The officer took a shaky breath. We're not detecting any direct assaults. Our ships are being taken. The humans are somehow boarding them. Xorvac's blood ran cold. The Ghost Fleet rises. Aboard the Vanguard's Wrath, an elite Galactic Council warship, Captain Threx was struggling to keep his crew together. The alarms blared through the corridors as his security team scrambled to repel an enemy they couldn't see. One by one, the ship's critical systems were failing. The engines flickered, the shields collapsed, and the security cameras looped the same empty corridors, until suddenly, dark figures appeared, moving in perfect synchronization. Humans. But these weren't the desperate, primitive soldiers the Council had fought centuries ago. These were ghosts. Dressed in black void armor, their visors glowed a deep crimson as they moved through the ship like shadows. No wasted movements, no unnecessary shots. They struck with precision, disabling ship systems, isolating command teams, and cutting off escape routes. Threx barely had time to process before the lights flickered once more, and a deep voice came through the ship's intercom. This vessel now belongs to humanity, turning the enemy's strength against them. Back aboard the Erebus Prime, Commander Vale received the latest reports. 9 enemy warships captured, 15 more disabled. Minimal human casualties. It was going exactly as planned. The Galactic Council had come to exterminate humanity, but instead of destroying the humans, they had delivered their most powerful warships into their hands. Vale turned to Mira Jansen. "What's the status of the command vessel?" She smirked. "Admiral Xorvac is still fighting, but his flagship's shields are gone. We could take him at any time." Vale nodded. "Send the boarding teams. We need him alive." The end of the fleet. Admiral Xorvac was panting. His flagship, the pride of Stelnera, was surrounded. His forces had been reduced to a handful of ships, and he could hear the battle raging through the corridors of his own command deck. The humans had infiltrated everything. "Sir, they're here." Xorvac turned just in time to see the doors to his bridge slide open. A squad of human soldiers, clad in black void armor, stepped through. They moved with military precision, weapons raised, but they didn't fire. And then he stepped forward. Commander Adrian Vell. The human leader wasn't wearing a helmet like his soldiers. He wanted Xorvac to see his face, to see the calm, collected expression of a man who had already won. "This is impossible," Xorvac muttered. You can't be this strong." Vale tilted his head. "You exiled us. You abandoned us in the void. You thought you had stripped us of everything." His voice was calm, cold. "But all you did was force us to evolve." Xorvac's legs gave out. He fell to his knees as he realized the full scale of what had just happened. Humanity hadn't survived exile. They had thrived. And now, they weren't just returning to the galactic stage. They were taking it. The news of the fleet's annihilation spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council had sent its most powerful armada to destroy the last remnants of humanity. Yet not only had the fleet been defeated, but many of its ships now flew under the Terran banner. Panic consumed the Council. For centuries, they had dictated the laws of the galaxy. They had crushed resistance with ease. But now, in their most desperate hour, they had no idea how to stop what was coming. Humanity had returned, and they were unstoppable. A nightmare made real. In the capital city of Zephyr Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, the most powerful leaders in the known universe had gathered for an emergency meeting. Chancellor Ralvek, an elder of the Tselneri species, tried to keep his voice steady as he addressed the room. "The fleet is lost." His mandibles clicked in frustration. "We have received confirmation that Admiral Xorvac is now a prisoner." The council members erupted into chaos. "How is that possible?" shouted a Turvac senator, his massive armored form barely fitting in his seat. Humanity was exiled. They had no access to the resources needed to rebuild. A Tselneri ambassador slammed his claws on the table. "They did more than rebuild. They surpassed us." A nervous aide rushed into the chamber, holding a trembling datapad. "Chancellor, we just received a transmission." The chamber fell into silence. A screen lowered from the ceiling, displaying a human. He stood tall, wearing a midnight black uniform adorned with a single silver emblem, a phoenix rising from the ashes. Commander Adrian Vell. His gaze swept over the council members. "We were exiled, left to die in the void. But instead of perishing, we built something stronger, something greater." He leaned in slightly. "Now, we have returned." A cold silence filled the chamber. Vale continued, his voice unwavering. "The Galactic Council has ruled through arrogance and fear for centuries. You believed yourselves untouchable." His eyes darkened. "That era is over." Chancellor Ralvek steeled himself. "Are you declaring war, human?" Vale smirked. "War? No, Chancellor." He gestured to something off-screen. "You misunderstand. The war is already over." The screen changed, displaying dozens of captured warships, now under human control. Ralvek felt his blood run cold. Humanity hadn't just won the battle. They had gained a fleet strong enough to challenge the Council itself. And then the final blow landed. Vale stepped aside, revealing Admiral Xorvac, bound and kneeling before him. The once proud admiral, the Council's greatest military leader, looked broken. His armor was scratched, his expression empty. Vale placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Admiral Xorvac has agreed to send a message to his people. He nodded to someone off-screen. A second later, Xorvac's voice, tired but clear, filled the chamber. To all surviving Council forces, lay down your arms. The war is lost. Humanity has won. The Council chamber erupted into chaos, the rise of the Phoenix. While the Council panicked, humanity moved swiftly. Terran fleets, using their newly acquired warships, advanced through the core sectors of the galaxy. Council strongholds fell without resistance. Many planetary leaders, seeing the inevitable, switched sides. They welcomed humanity as liberators, eager to align with the unstoppable force sweeping across the stars. And yet, humanity did not seek senseless destruction. Where once the Council had ruled through oppression, humanity offered something else. Choice. For those who had suffered under the Council's rule, they offered protection. For those who had once been enemies but wished to surrender, they offered amnesty. But for those who still resisted, there was no mercy. The final warning. Back in the Council chamber, Chancellor Ralvek clenched his fists. "What do you want?" he hissed. Vale's expression was unreadable. Simple. He leaned forward. "Your power is over." Ralvek laughed bitterly. "And if we refuse?" Vale's smirk returned. "Then we finish what you started." Behind him, the screen shifted once more, showing Earth's true might. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen loomed over Council worlds. Massive black dreadnoughts, each one capable of erasing an entire planet, hovered above Xi-For Prime. Vale's voice dropped to a whisper. "Choose wisely." And for the first time in history, the Galactic Council surrendered. The dawn of a new era. As humanity's flag was raised above the Council capital, a single message was broadcast across the galaxy. The exiles have returned. But this was not revenge. This was a reckoning. The surrender of the Galactic Council sent shockwaves across the stars. Once they had been the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy. Now, they knelt before the very species they had exiled. Across thousands of planets, the news spread like wildfire. Some celebrated, seeing humanity as liberators. Others trembled in fear, wondering what fate awaited them. And on Earth, where it had all begun, the people watched as their long-awaited vengeance was fulfilled. But humanity had not returned for vengeance alone. They had returned to rule. The fall of the old order. As the Terran fleet spread through the galaxy, taking control of former Council strongholds, one truth became undeniable. Humanity was now the dominant power. On Xi-For Prime, the Galactic Council's once great capital, humans now walked the halls where they had once been mocked and exiled. The grand banners of the Council were torn down, replaced by a new emblem, a silver phoenix rising from a black starfield. Commander Adrian Vale stood at the heart of the Council chamber, watching as alien delegates reluctantly took their seats. Once, these beings had laughed at humanity. Now they sat in fearful silence, waiting to hear what came next. Vale's voice echoed through the grand chamber. "The Galactic Council is finished." A tense silence followed. Then he continued, his tone firm but calm. "But we are not here to repeat your mistakes. You ruled through fear. We will rule through strength. You divided the galaxy. We will unite it." Some of the alien leaders sighed in relief. They had expected Earth to unleash destruction. Instead, humanity offered something else, a new order. But there would be rules. The strong would no longer prey upon the weak. Trade would be open to all, not just the elite. And those who sought war would find only fire. Vale's gaze swept across the chamber. "This is not a negotiation. This is your only chance. Adapt or be erased." And one by one, the galaxy's leaders bowed their heads in submission. Earth's final lesson. For centuries, the Council had ruled with arrogance, believing themselves untouchable. They had thought exiling humanity would remove them from history. But humanity had done the impossible. They had survived. They had grown stronger. And now, They ruled. As the new Terran High Command took its place, one final message was sent to every world in the galaxy. The exiles have returned. The old order is dead. The future begins now. And with that, humanity's new empire rose from the ashes, unchallenged. The bridge of the Terran flagship, Eternal Resolve, overlooked the once great capital of the Galactic Council, Sci-Fi, where once the banners of the old order had flown. Now the insignia of humanity's new empire blazed across the skyline, a silver phoenix rising from the void. Commander Adrian Vale stood at the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the planet below. His officers, veterans of Earth's long exile, stood at attention behind him. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the alien leaders who had once laughed at humanity's weakness. Now they stood silent, heads bowed in submission. The last remnants of resistance had collapsed. The galaxy belonged to Earth. Vale exhaled slowly. "It's done," his second-in-command, Captain Rena, said beside him. "After 3,000 years, we've won." A moment of silence. Then, from the depths of space, thousands of Terran warships emerged, sleek, powerful, unstoppable. The fleets of the exiles had returned home. The final transmission was sent across the stars, broadcast to every world, every station, every being in the galaxy. "We were cast out. We were forgotten. You tried to erase us. But humanity endures. The old order has fallen. And now, the exiles rule." The transmission ended. Far below, on planets where once humanity had been mocked, aliens now whispered a new name in reverence and fear: Earth. And in the vast darkness of space, the fleets of mankind moved forward, not as conquerors, not as exiles, but as rulers. And this was only the beginning.